He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, welcome to The Alex Marlow Show. Glad you're here. Hope you had a nice Memorial Day weekend. I really did. I got the summer off to a great start. I dragged the kids to Palm Desert to go see Nana Wynn, Papa Bob, and they were, it was a fantastic time. In the pool a lot. I didn't get burned. I got a little toasty. I'm sure those of you who are watching can see it in the streams. It was fun to watch the show soar up the charts on iTunes over the weekend. Those of you who missed my Friday show, I'm sure it probably wasn't many of you. We had Mike Benz on, and we had May Mailman from the White House breaking down some of the Harvard stuff, deep Harvard. We'll have to do a lot more on that throughout the course of the week. And as Trump is cracking down, we're seeing right now the Trump administration is seeking to cut the remaining federal ties to Harvard. That's great. And it's one of these things, this came up briefly, but it's important to point this out. Trump has backed the left into the corner where yet again they're defending something that no one really likes. We've learned that he's already cut $3 billion out of the federal funds allocated towards Harvard. How many of you who swing a hammer for a living or know someone who does, which is all of you, think that those individuals should be funding all the woke BS that goes on at Harvard and all the self-aggrandizement? And considering they have a big enough hedge fund with the Harvard Corporation run by Democrat Penny Pritzker and with their $50 billion endowment to take care of everything they need to do whatever it is that they want to do. So totally ridiculous, and why they need to have thousands upon thousands of foreign oligarchs have their children come to that school. Not for me, and I don't think it's for many people. And yet you see just completely unhinged attacks from the left on Trump for doing this. A Harvard professor who is known for her research on honesty was fired over alleged data fraud. Unbelievable stuff we have at Breitbart News. Earlier today, Harvard University professor from the business school, Professor Francesca Gino, she's now on administrative leave after she was accused of falsifying data. I think NBC News was first to report on this, and the New York Post has some reports on it. But it's a star business professor stripped of her tenure, fired for manipulating data. Losing your tenure at Harvard does not happen. That is incredibly rare. It's one of these things where things are almost never that bad. And if they are, then usually people just quit ahead of time because to not have the humiliation. So that is wild that is taking place. Recall all the work that was done with Claudine Gay, the president there, who was accused of plagiarism. I think it was Christopher Rufo who had that bust. And it was just over and over again. Harvard continues to be not a moral beacon or paragon in our society, and I just don't know who's getting their values from Harvard. A lot of people, sadly, probably are, and they shouldn't. Good for Trump for finding out this target. It is just a terrific, terrific target. It's got people completely apoplectic in the news business. You guys might have heard of Scott Pelley. He's the anchor for CBS. And he's on 60 Minutes, but I think he was their main anchor on their nightly news as well. He gave the commencement. It's commencement season. You can always get great left-wing content. I always look forward to commencement season in the very early days of Breitbart when we were pretty much the only conservative outlet, because I think playing the left-wing unhinged commencement addresses is one of the best ways to understand where the left is at any given moment and where their values are. Here is Scott Pelley giving the commencement address at Wake Forest University. Check out some of this.
This moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts.
Wow, reaching to our private thoughts, my goodness. He's got nothing. You can see, I'll play some more so you can see how thin his ideas are. But he says them in a way that makes him sound a little like Sean Connery. And he's so intense and serious, credible, even though he has nothing to say. And he's talking about how the Sherry Redstone, who is I guess she's the chair on one of the top people at Paramount, putting a lot of pressure on CBS to stop being just so knee-jerk anti-Trump and only investigating things that make Trump look bad. Pelley has been very upset about that and vocal about that recently, but him talking about universities being under attack and journalism being under attack. Journalism is under attack from itself because they kept lying to us over and over again. They kept trying to tell us that things that were fundamentally true, that were observable with our own naked eye, were false. And they're the ones in crisis because we're rejecting them. It's not that it's under attack from Trump. It's under attack from us because we've been rejecting them. People are finally getting the message here that the media lies to you, and they have been. And their role is not to carry water for Democrats and only attack Republicans. And this is what's news to Scott Pelley. I'm going to come back to this clip, but Misty pulled a clip of Jake Tapper for me. We're still in the Tapper news cycle with his original Sin gaslighting book that's out. Here's Tapper. Check this out, this clip from a guy who's supposed to be one of the best journalists around. Check this out.
And I think that we need to be skeptical of everything that we are told by people in power. And I mean, that obviously should be the mantra of being a journalist to begin with. If your mother tells you she loves you, get a second source. Right. But we just need to remember that, like, politicians lie, White Houses lie, power is an aphrodisiac. And we just need to all remember that and not take at face value anything that we're
Doesn't this come up if you went to journalism school in like the first 30 minutes of the first lecture? I mean, it's observable from, you don't have to go to J school to figure this out. This guy is supposed to be one of the standard bearers of his institution, which is, the fourth estate, the media, and he's acting like this is some new information. He caught himself. He said it's obvious, right? Of course it's obvious. These people are interested in power, and if you're interested in power, you're not going to self-police all the time. That's the role of journalists. We're supposed to be they're looking after people who are lying to us and misleading us to try to get power. So they're really in a crisis mode. I'm going to go back to this Pelley clip here because it somehow gets even better. Check this out.
Our homes and into our private thoughts.
All right, private thoughts.
The fear to speak. In America, power can rewrite history with grotesque, false narratives. They can make criminals heroes.
Does he know this isn't working, that he's doing this dramatic? Like, you see where I paused on the screen. He looks like he's performing Shakespeare. He's just giving a commencement address.
And heroes, criminals. Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality. Diversity is now described as illegal. Equity is to be shunned. Inclusion is a dirty word. This is an old playbook, my friends. There's nothing new in this.
He has nothing to say. It's just the drama. It's interesting because, now that I'm on camera all the time, I really notice how when I'm doing too much performance, it's all performance. Everything's a performance. When I'm doing too much performance, it just doesn't go well. It just doesn't come off well. It just comes off very poorly. It is, but when you're in the credibility business, when you're in the news business, you just need to come off as somewhat authentic. I mean, that was the most overly dramatic, melodramatic, like a high school play he's performing. Diversity, equity, inclusion. The problem is it's not about diversity or equity or inclusion. First of all, equity is sort of a made-up word, right? Because equality, we didn't think got the job done, because equality meant that we actually treat people equally, and equity allows for us to treat people that we perceive as discriminated against as superior to those who were born with more advantages. So that's why they need equity. But the problem with it is not diversity or inclusion. The problem with it is that it's actually Marxism. It's neo-Marxism. It's critical race theory. It is this ideology that's woke left. So it is, and we've been trying the DEI stuff for a while. And what's happened? We've gotten more divided. We're not getting smarter. Our test scores are not going up. And I think there's an increased sensitivity towards races that could even be hostility. I don't think the races are getting along any better since we started the DEI stuff. And in fact, you can make a pretty good case that they've gone backwards. It's also a jobs program. It creates all of these woke left-wing jobs, these universities, stuff like that, and these corporations to try to make sure that you're hitting the quotas for the right DEI stuff. None of it's merit-based, none of it's excellence-based, none of it's nuance or innovation-based. It's all based off of trying to get people to be constantly thinking about what the left wants them thinking about, which is their various demographics and their groupings and their tribes. And none of that's working. It's not working for us. We've been doing it for a while. So all the racial quotas, all the diversity that's forced upon us is just making us not like each other. And it's not making us better. It's not making us smarter. It's not making us happier. And it's not making us more inclusive, I don't think. I think it's making us more exclusive. And that's one of the problems a lot of these universities are doing is they're excluding people because they are in a group that is perceived as more advantaged. So it was all a big hoax, and that's our problem with it. But he doesn't care about that stuff. He's a CBS anchor. He just cares about getting accolades. So anyway, so all that stuff's good. Trump's really onto something there. And this is one where the more we talk to people, the better it's going to be. Let's see. So other stuff in the news. I should have mentioned this earlier. Ed Martin's here. I just taped with him 30 minutes. He's unbelievable. He was the interim U.S. attorney in D.C. He is a friend of mine. He's been a fill-in host for me throughout the years on my various shows. And he's now the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Weaponization Czar. So he's looking at the weaponization of the government, and the U.S. Pardon Attorney. We get into all that. It's going to be great. And so it's just good timing there. But other stuff I want to highlight ahead of time. My Breitbart Fight Club show today with Oliver Lane, who is our London bureau chief. We get into the Ukraine-Russia war, which has really gone backwards. I should have asked Missy to pull this clip, but Trump was talking on the tarmac over the weekend saying, I don't know what the hell has happened to Putin. And I'm kind of with Trump on this, is that Putin has typically acted rationally, but he does seem to be behaving from everything that we're reading at Breitbart News. And the person who brought this to my attention first was Frances Martel, our world editor. And she said, I think Putin's kind of starting to be unreasonable here. And has not been his reputation. Him invading, of course, he started the war, even though I believe it was fundamentally Joe Biden's fault. And if Joe Biden had better policy in that region, I don't think Putin would have invaded. Wrote a whole chapter about it in Breaking Biden. You will enjoy it if you read it. I promise. My favorite chapter of the book, How Biden Caused the Ukraine War. But Putin has largely acted, I think, rationally throughout this. And all of a sudden, I feel like the path to peace seems very far off. Trump feels as though he cannot get through to him. And there's a lot of talks of being a dead deal. And a lot of people that were very smart are talking about this is going to be a perpetual war, could go on for years, if not decades, who knows. And it's not great. It's not great. But partially because I was hoping Trump could figure this out, get the peace going, win a Nobel Peace Prize maybe just to spite the lefties. Not like it matters, a meaningless award, but that'd be fun. So a lot of bad news over there. We break that down. Plus the smack of Brigitte Macron, of Emmanuel Macron on a plane, which you all saw. And so we talked about that in the Fight Club show. But China's aiding Russia in their war efforts with tech parts and special chemicals. So this is not good news. It's not new news. We knew that China was helping Russia, but I don't like when they're getting closer together. That does not help us geopolitically in America. I would like to see Russia pulled away from China, not the other way around. I think that weakens China, and I think it potentially makes Russia to be a little more reasonable for negotiations. But it sounds like Putin has taken Kursk, which was a part of Ukraine, I guess temporarily old Soviet Union stuff as usual. But it is one of these things where it feels like the lines are not moving in that war. The battle lines are not moving. And that is very much a stalemate territory, because it sounds like Putin has not been offered from Ukraine enough assurances that he can go home and claim victory, which is what Putin's going to need. If Putin can't claim victory, then he is not leaving. And it sounds like Ukraine wants to do the same. It doesn't sound like they want to give up any territory. It's just not, we're not going to get to a peace if that's the case. So we'll see what Trump's going to do. I think Trump's frustrated, but he's going to have to make some moves here, because I do think that he wants the peace in that region. I think he sees that as beneficial to his legacy and the world in general, U.S. economy, the things that Trump cares about. So let's see what moves Trump has, but they're not going to make it easy on him. All right, other stuff. South Africa's Ramaphosa defending the kill the Boer chants. A lot of viral footage over the weekend of more kill the Boer, which is killing the white farmers in South Africa. So an issue we continue to track at Breitbart News. I mentioned the Macron thing. Macron getting punched, I guess, by his wife on a plane. The amazing thing that is that his retort to it, he addressed it and said it was an AI. And then I guess they kind of came off that, but they suggested it was, I guess, faked. And that the punch was as true as that Macron is a homosexual and a drug addict. But here's the thing is we got the footage of the punch. So does that mean he's owning up to being a homosexual and a drug addict, which has been the rumors? I don't think that's what he meant to do, but I think that's inadvertently what he did do here. So odd stuff. More details on the Breitbart Fight Club interview over there. A couple other things before we bring in Ed Martin. A Bruce Springsteen cover band has lost a gig in New Jersey over the Bruce Springsteen overseas tirade against America that we highlighted at Breitbart. President Trump picked it up. And so now even Bruce Springsteen cover bands are getting canceled. So there's going to be a lot of hardworking cover band artists out of work out there, Bruce, all thanks to you. So he loves to talk about working class people out of work. Well, now the Bruce Springsteen cover bands are going to have a major setback. All right, that guy's a loser. I will say that very sad news that Duck Dynasty star Phil Robertson passed away at 79, though his family said that we celebrate today that our father, husband, and grandfather, Phil Robertson, is now with the Lord. Phil was a legendary person. The Duck Dynasty show was truly iconic. I got a chance to interview him several times and meet him several times in person. He's just an amazing person who came to God later in life and used his platform as a reality star and as a guy who patented an amazing duck whistle to preach the gospel, the good news of the Lord, and would say things fearlessly, calling out certain types of sin that he saw rampant in society that he thought people were too afraid to call out. So, and he wants America to be godly again, to be great again. Longtime supporter from Trump, was on the Trump train very early on. So he had this Citizens United movie, which is Dave Bossie's group, Torchbearer, where he talked about if Donald Trump does not win, this was 2016, I think I'm going into the woods and stay there the rest of my life, which was amazing. So Trump did win, of course, and Duck Commander was one of the more vocal guys who was out there on his behalf, and just a total American original, and he will be missed. But that was a Bannon joint, by the way. Bannon directed that. So those of you who are interested in such things, I'm sure you can get it. Where is this thing now? I'm trying to figure it out. But Torchbearer is the name of it. If you want to look into that movie, Bannon directing Phil Robertson. It's entertaining, right? All right. That's a good place for now. I will tell you, we have a fantastic sponsor, which is Priority Gold. You've heard me talk about Priority Gold over and over again. It is, if you want to learn more about them, you text the word freedom to 24999. That's the whole number. Or you can go to prioritygold.com/freedom, but freedom to 24999, prioritygold.com. It is a mistake to not be in the gold game right now. I'm looking at it right now, just past $3,300 an ounce again, up 40% year over year, up 24% year to date. It is the hedge against a chaotic economy. Later in the week, we'll do more on EU tariffs, China tariffs. There is so much drama in the world economy, the national economy, the stock market up and down. Gold is the right hedge there, and they will give you a gold guide, how to get invested in gold, gold IRAs, gold 401ks. I'm a big believer in it, and these are great people, and they're great supporters of the show, help the show get off the ground. So it's prioritygold.com/freedom, or text the word freedom to 24999. Let's bring in Ed Martin. All right. So a lot of you in the audience know over the past couple of weeks, I reminded people that when I used to host Breitbart News Daily, one of my favorite fill-in hosts was Ed Martin, who was tapped by Phyllis Schlafly to be one of the leaders of this movement at this time. Trump wanted him to be the attorney for D.C., the U.S. attorney, one of the most powerful jobs you could have. That was his will. That was our will. We were rooting him on, and yet he got blocked by Republicans. And now he's on to hopefully bigger and better things, but still is sort of a shocking turn of events. And with me now on the program is Ed Martin. Ed, it is great to speak with you. It's been too long. You've been through so much. But one thing that I think is so important for people to understand about you before we get into any of the important work you're doing, you've got a bunch of cool new titles that we're going to get to. But one thing that I really think is important is that you've spent a lifetime dedicated to fighting for these values, for conservative values, card-carrying member of the conservative movement. I have one criterion for appointees now, for judicial, for political, whatever it is. I want to see the receipts. I want to see that you've spent a lifetime fighting for these values. That's what matters most. I don't care if you're smart. I don't care if you're dumb. I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're purple. I don't care if you're a woman. I don't care if you're bald. None of that matters to me. All that matters, I want to see the receipts that you have done stuff in this movement so we can trust you. You were that guy. And yet somehow not every Republican was up for that. But speak about your background to me.
Well, thanks, Alex. And I loved being on your show, hosting your show, because your listeners are awesome. They were awesome, chiming in and it was great. So always a pleasure. Great to be with you. Yeah, look, Phyllis Schlafly taught me, and you were very kind to her. Breitbart has always been good to her, and Andrew, the late Andrew Breitbart, actually Phyllis was a great admirer of him. Like Andrew, Phyllis, now deceased, she ran towards the fight, and she taught us how to handle that, how to, understand you're going to weather the storms, you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to go towards the fight. And she also taught me how to make sure you didn't leave behind any of the folks that were on our side. That was a big part of it, as you mentioned. So look, I coming out of law school, I went to work for my church for a while, and then I was involved in politics. And I as a lawyer, I took on some cases that were, eminent domain reform. I took on Blagojevich, who was bullying pro-lifers. I represented, as you know, J6 defendants pro bono. And Phyllis taught us to kind of be find our way into the fight. I will say, Alex, you'll smile and enjoy. I really got beat in the Senate fight because I had said something about almost every Republican senator on my radio show and on shows like yours. So when Chuck Schumer wanted to sink my candidacy, this is a serious thing. He went and did opposition research, and he was going around to the Republicans saying, look, this is what Martin said about you, primary you. And everybody from Ted Cruz to Cassidy to Cornyn to Tillis to Murkowski I had taken a turn at them. So I earned my enemies fairly, I suppose, but it is what it is. And there's important work to be done right now, and I'm excited to be doing it.
It's an amazing town, DC, and that you say something nice about someone and it doesn't mean anything, just washes over them. And you say something mean and they just remember it for the rest of their lives. They can't wait to get back at them. It's so unproductive. Ed and I also have something in common. I don't think there's anyone else in the movement, Ed, who is married to a doctor and has exactly 4 kids. I think we're alone in that.
That's true.
That's not true. Ken Klukowski, who works at Mike Lee's office now and used to work for me at Breitbart, he's married to a doctor with 4 kids. All right. So we're going to have a club. We'll have to have like a separate club.
I like it.
But speak to me about what drew you to Phyllis, because we don't talk about her enough as really should be sort of on the Mount Rushmore of the conservative movement. And you were carrying the torch for her at some of her outposts for a while. So what about her drew you to her and have that be sort of where you kept shop for a while?
It's really nice of you to ask, Alex, because I don't get to talk about her enough. Phyllis Schlafly lived to be 92 years old. She was right about all the issues. She was really right about the tactics. She was a great strategist. She started in many ways the pro-life movement, at least within the Republican Party. She started the pro-family movement in the 1970s. She was famous for a decade or more as one of the leading voices in the tough on the Soviets fight. There was the strategic balance, it was called, and there was lots of people like Kissinger and others who wanted to sort of appease the Soviets. Phyllis was a hardliner and writing about it because as a young housewife, and she was Harvard educated, she liked to say she was a housewife. She was Harvard educated, went back and did a law degree, graduated in the top of her class at WashU. She was a great writer, but she, as a young Catholic woman, and married and had a bunch of kids, she was worried about the communists. If you were alive and awake in the 1940s and 50s, the communist threat, they rolled through Hungary. She started the Cardinal Mindszenty Foundation in 1958 to try to fight and try to help Cardinal Mindszenty and the Hungarians. So she was an expert, and every place she went, every aspect of American political life, she was an expert, and she was really strategic. And I had the chance the last about 9 years of her life to know her very well. Last 5 years of her life to work, every day with her. She saw Trump early, and because she had been strong on America first, things like multilateral trade deals were a betrayal. She saw in Trump a guy that got it. She saw in Trump a guy that understood the immigration question. She saw in Trump a guy who understood the culture battles. I mean, she early on, and I don't think Trump knows this, Trump does not succeed except for Phyllis, because early on he was a Democrat from New York who'd been married a couple times, and no conservative knew well, Ted Cruz is conservative. We'll be with Ted. Phyllis was early and said, that's the guy. He can win. He is reliable. She trusted him, and he came to her funeral. She died in September of 2016. He got off the campaign trail and came to her funeral and spoke for 5 minutes on her and what she meant to him. And he's talked to me about it before. So she was, and here's the thing. She did things that nobody really even realizes. She was the first leader to say to the Baptists, the Catholics, the Jews, and the Mormons, don't worry about who's going to heaven. Link arms on the issue and fight. And that was the 1970s early. That was what the moral majority and Reagan put together to win in 1980. She was the first one to do that, and she was able to do it because it was all housewives who said, we're going to try to beat back the ERA. And so she was an extraordinarily talented lady. She was a great writer, Alex, you'll appreciate. She always was writing. She wrote till the end of her life. She believed that writing kept you clear, your thinking clear. And she was really special, and she is looking down on us and reveling in the second Trump term and a lot of the things that are happening.
That's so amazing. What a great summary, Ed. And it's one of these things where she inspired so many people in the movement that I know that Julia Hahn, who is a person who worked very closely with me, Breitbart, for a long time, and then worked for President Trump, and now is Senator Haggerty, and just one of these unsung heroes of the movement, was just, she's someone who grew up at the same high school as I did in Beverly Hills, and just drawn to Phyllis Schlafly, and her tentacles are very long and in a very good way. And so it's very cool to get a chance to talk about her a little bit this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
So fast forward to Trump nominates you for U.S. Attorney to D.C. So what was your vision for that job in general? Because you were acting for a while also. So you were doing it.
Yeah, more important. There's a more important. There's a very important, again, a strategic vision that we had. Many of us that watched Donald Trump win and helped with that thought, we can't have a situation where on day one you go in and all these important offices are filled with acting. I call it the Sally Yates problem. If you remember Sally Yates, she was the acting U.S. Attorney General, and she was a disaster. She burned Donald Trump. So I actually asked to be appointed on a special appointment for 120 days as U.S. Attorney, and I immediately got in and I did the job as if I could never be confirmed. I took a shot at Chuck Schumer, figuratively. I said he broke the. I was worried that he broke the law when he threatened Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and I publicly took him on. I went after other members of the sort of holy alliance, congressmen and senators, and said, the law is going to be, no one's above the law. I went after I was the earliest guy. 5 days after I was in office, I was talking about Joe Biden's competence and whether the pardons that he signed were actually valid. And so every aspect of this, we needed to get going. And Donald Trump said to us and to me, make D.C. safe. And so instead of 1,600 political prosecutions, which was J6, we actually went after gun crime, and we started cracking down on gun crime. And we watched right away. You take the guys with guns that are jerks off the streets, and that's what we're doing. Immediately, life gets better because they're the same kind of people that beat up their girlfriend or rob a convenience store. Same group class of people. So we immediately crime dived, and now I had to go up for confirmation before the Senate and ran into a buzzsaw of Republicans who didn't want to have me there. But it didn't matter to me because we had started the process with such aggressiveness that I knew if we got a good replacement, and Judge Jeanine Pirro is really good, that she would be able to keep the momentum going, both in terms of safety and in terms of the other issues that we had to do. So it was the priority was safety in D.C. because the president wanted that, but it also was to be aggressive at this moment in history. I love to quote, Alex. I know you'll smile because people do this to you, but I love when Andrew Breitbart does that one thing where he just looks at the camera and he says war. And I believe I believe that this moment we're in. They shot the president. They tried to imprison major classes of people, from the J6ers to the lawyers who have represented Trump. These people are truly, truly on evil courses that did this. And so it's not a debate. It's not a debating society. It doesn't mean that we can become then. We have to abide by our own morality and the law. But it does mean that we have to be real about the aggressiveness that we're taking this. And so I was in my element as U.S. attorney, trying to make sure we kept the place safe, and we fought back for the right causes. We were digging into USAID, the fraud that, billions and billions of dollars shoveled out the door by Joe Biden in ways that are at least unprecedented, if not criminal. And we dug into that, and on and on and on. And so I was really proud that President Trump thought that we should start strong like that on day one. And that's how I got that appointment for 120 days. And ultimately how I was up against the deadline. So it turns out that the senators could hem and haw and end up slowing me down. And so the president moved me to a different spot.
Yeah, really interesting, because that color makes a lot of sense. That your whole approach was, I'm going to be super aggressive and figure I'm not going to get confirmed. And then it sounded like you were pretty close to actually still getting confirmed anyway.
Yeah.
But so I was noticing how I was kind of surprised Trump had taken the loss on that one and just moved you and put in Judge Jeanine, which is fine. Well, we're all cool with Judge Jeanine. I like Judge Jeanine quite a bit, but it's I guess now I understand it, that I guess it was sort of a inside straight if you're going to get confirmed anyway. But that said, it was still very jarring for us because we've moved past the woke moment. And I guess Tom Tillis's problem with you was that you I guess hadn't been critical enough of J6 or something. And it just, I thought we were past that. I thought, how long are we going to punish ourselves for that stuff? It just seems so absurd. That we're still talking about that now. Can we please just move on? How many years do we want to dedicate to this? And that was really kind of awful to watch, because to the way I open this segment, I think is so important. We understand we are in a war for the soul of this country. Joe Biden was right about that. And we need to think of it that way. Who's helping? You're helping, and you've been helping your whole life. So why are you the problem? And that's what's so striking to me from, my perch at Breitbart. Did you get a chance to talk to him at all? What was his deal?
You mean Tillis? Tom
Tillis,
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I look. The last meeting I had was 90 minutes long. There was a whole bunch of people in the room, really impressive names. If I told you, he was ranting and raving about January 6th. That was what he said. Then he did say he was going to let us go forward. If we got to the floor, we would win. They wouldn't vote against me on the floor. They would only do this machinations behind the scenes. And then he changed his mind. Either he changed his mind or he lied to us, one of the two. And ultimately, look. Alex, here's how I'd say it. The president was faced with using more chits to get me confirmed to a job that in some ways I had already done, and he could put somebody good in there.
Wow.
And he moved me over to a spot that's frankly even better. The whole nation is now my focus because I'm the weaponization working group. So I just had a meeting where we're talking about Tina Peters in Colorado and how she was lawfared. We're talking about Arizona and the alternate electors and how that case is a disaster because the prosecutors are upside down. Because weaponization was the use of government against the American people, and everything from elections to COVID, it's all on the table in the weaponization working group.
Sure. And
also, by the way, in what I think is my favorite part of this job right now is I'm the U.S. pardon attorney. And
okay,
over the
so
weekend,
hold on though. I want to break this down for the audience.
Right.
Let me say because this is really the focal point of what I want to talk about anyway. So let me just reintroduce what's going on here. So Ed now has got 3 new roles, and these are all super vital. One of them is the Weaponization Czar. So he's looking at the weaponization of government against private individuals. This is a subject of my research, and so we're going to be doing a ton of content on this throughout the year on the Marlow Show. He's the U.S. pardon attorney, so I'm going to ask you in a second, Ed, what's a priority there, and then also the Associate Deputy Attorney General. It sounds like a very broad title, so you're going to have to break all that down. But let's start with the Weaponization Czar stuff. What is that role? Is that a new role? And give me a sense of what you're working on.
Well, let me do it if I can solve the last one. The number 3 is Associate Deputy Attorney General is kind of like one of the
Sure.
I don't know top 15 people in the building. But then within that, you get assigned a certain docket. Mine is the weaponization, so it's kind of a title that means one of the senior guys. Then mine is weaponization. When Donald Trump was elected, his first day, he had an executive order saying get weaponization out of government. When Attorney General Bondi was confirmed, she put a memorandum out on day 1 saying I'm starting a weaponization working group. I want you to look at Fannie Willis and Jack Smith and Alvin Bragg. I want you to look at targeting school board parents, Catholics. I want you to look at the whistleblowers who were targeted. Long list, actually, about 8 categories. And then beyond that, we started meeting right away. I was a member of it. And beyond that, actually, was other aspects of things. Like I've worked with Bobby Kennedy on COVID. Did they weaponize? How did they weaponize the COVID stuff against the citizens? And so there's categories all across government getting to the bottom of, and 3 steps, Alex. One is tell the truth. We deserve the truth. We need to know what happened, who did it, and why. If you have to name and shame, we're going to name and shame. Some of these people don't have shame, but we're going to name and shame them. Number 2 is, where possible, hold them accountable. Criminally, if they lose their jobs, take away their the grants to their universities, whatever it is, make sure that we have accountability. So tell the truth, hold them accountable. And the third thing, Alex, which this made Tillis a little nervous. He's like, "You're for reparations." I said, "I'm not for reparations. I am for restitution. If you put somebody in jail for years, you should have to, and you lied about it, you should have to pay for it, right? If you put somebody through the ringer in a way that is unfair and it's deemed unfair by telling the truth, holding them accountable, you should fix it, right? This is America. It shouldn't be Strzok and Page got a sweetheart deal to get paid because their texts were shown. That happened. They got $1 million because the Biden administration and Merrick Garland paid them off. This is the ultimate payoff for inside the mob. Well, no, we're talking about people that are truly damaged. If you're damaged, you should be made whole. That's what's at stake with weaponization. And we're going to drive all the way down to the bottom of these things. We're not going to give up. We're not going to hear statute of limitation is run. I don't give a darn. We're going to name and shame. We're going to hold you accountable. And then we're going to say, you know what? You got put in jail. Some of these people rotted in jail for 3 years on January 6th on a lie that Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco made up. Andrew Weissman created it and tried to use it in the Mueller. And then they used it called the 1512 charge. It was done incorrectly, and a bipartisan Supreme Court threw it out. Kajanji Jackson said, yeah, you got to throw that out. Well, those people that were in jail, as soon as they got that done, they walked because they were on misdemeanors only. That's so wrong and un-American. We've got to get to the bottom of it and make people whole, and we're going to do it.
Yeah, amazing. So you've only been on the new gig for a week, but are there any surprises you've come across so far when it comes to weaponization? Because this really is one of the big fights of our time, I think. If we can get this out of our government, I think America is going to be on great footing going forward for the next 100 years. And if we can't, then this could be we could have hit our peak and we could be heading downhill.
Yeah, let me answer it in 2 ways. One is, as U.S. Attorney for D.C., it's almost 900 employees, and it's kind of the all-star law firm of the deep state, right? I mean, these people are really talented and they're really capable and experienced, and they fight back. So the first thing that surprised me is when you're actually in sort of close combat with the deep state like this, it's really tough, man. It's really tough. I know you know this, but it is, I talk to Bongino all the time, and Bongino is working his tail off. It's a battle. And my piece of the pie at the U.S. Attorney's Office was like this big, and I got about this much control by the time I was done. Bongino and Cash, it's as big as a mountain, and they're trying to get control. It's a battle, I will say, and the odds feel long. So that's one thing that I will tell you.
It's a battle because of the deep staters that are in there.
Yeah, because of the deep state and the way it's structured. The system is structured in such a way, some percentage are nasty and they're looking to actually destroy you. The other group of people are conditioned to a system that's kind of geared towards survival, which leans towards the bureaucracy, right, to self-maintenance. And so you're sort of in this. It's a really. My point is only that it's harder than it looks. You guys like Elon digging in. It's yeoman's work is one thing. The second thing I would say though is they're not used to fighters, and so when you fight, they don't know what to make of it. And it's one of the reasons I encourage people, like, now is our time, right? We're on the, it may not feel like we're on the march, and we're on the march. And when you get to the bottom of some of what these people are doing, how they're using government weaponized, this against the providers of television and radio and internet, right? Government leaning on these people. And this is all available. We have to, in other words, we can get to the bottom of this. We just have to be fearless in it. And frankly, Alex, more people have to step towards the fight because it's lonely. You know, the first week I was on, it was me and a guy named Emil Bove, who was over at the Department of Justice, and a couple other people. Everybody else wasn't confirmed yet. And we're on there like the few, the proud. So we need more people coming towards the fight.
He's a good guy. He's a real warrior.
He is great guy.
Yeah. No. Okay. So what are the top priorities over there? Because it feels like, I mean, I know you're just getting your feet wet, but what's the plan? I mean, I don't want you to give it all away. I don't want you to tip off the deep state.
I'm happy to tell you. And by the way, one other thing, Alex, I'll tell you is that as I've gotten this profile up on this in just the last 3 weeks, the number of people that come forward that have real stories, truths about weaponization of government. You know, you and I know the famous ones, the Russia hoax, all these things. People had government weaponized against them all over the place. It's a terrible injustice. Look, the categories are obvious. The lawfare that you can see from a guy like Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James. Letitia James, by the way, she effectively destroyed the NRA. She effectively destroyed VDARE, a nonprofit that's been around forever that's conservative on immigration issue. She effectively destroyed Donald Trump's business, or she tried to, right? I mean, this lawfare thing, the bar associations in this country have been willing participants in the targeting against. So lawfare as a category is one big one that we've got to get to the bottom of. Censorship, the use of government to drive the control of messaging. You only have to listen to Mike Benz for a little while to realize the categories. But I'm telling you that the instances are real, and the way it's done is real and present, and it's a danger that's got to be rooted out. The main corruption in this town, Alex, is a kind of money laundering that masquerades as appropriation. So USAID getting hundreds of millions of dollars, and the money's transferred to nonprofits. When the EPA administrator, when he noticed that $6.7 billion went to a nonprofit, that was Lee Zeldin saw it. He's like, wait a second. That's the largest transfer of wealth ever, $6.7 billion to a nonprofit. The nonprofit was made up of 3 other nonprofits, which were created out of whole cloth, and they were working together. This should draw scrutiny from us because it's not normal. Just like, by the way, the use of the White House auto pen. People say, well, auto pens are legal. They are legal. The question is whether they're being done in a way that's corrupt. And we have evidence that leans in the direction of quite a mess. So the categories are clear. And one thing I will say, Alex, and this is what Phyllis Schlafly taught and Andrew taught, you have to pick the right targets, right? I don't want to get distracted by shiny objects. I want to focus on what's fundamental. And the fundamental thing is limiting the scope and power of the government against we the people, so that it'll be better for you, as you mentioned, 50 or 100 years, not just better for 15 months.
What's the biggest obstructions for you? Is it deep state people trying to block you within your own organization, or is it just how the scope of the weaponization in general? I mean, what do you feel like are the main concerns?
Two ways to say it. Most of the kinds of things we're looking at are fairly sophisticated, meaning they've tried to hide their tracks and they've tried to kind of keep things. So you sort of have to work at it. If it's glaring, it's usually small time. Like glaring is usually stupid, and so that's small time. The people that are really doing this have set up systems. The application for the $6.7 billion was 74 pages long. They spent $1 million of lawyers just to get the application ready. In other words, when you're getting that much money, you're going to spend money to do it. So it's sophisticated. So that's that. But the largest barrier by far is time. The system is set up to run us out of time. When you see Article 3 judges and they strike down something Trump does, and then you have to appeal, then there's an appeal from that, and they wait 2 weeks and a month, and then the system is designed to drag us through a legal set of constraints that are really like the Lilliputians tying down, the giant. And one of the things, Alex, that the only way to fight back is don't wait for prosecution, name and shame now. That's one of the reasons I'm out more, because you can't afford to wait for a court of appeals ruling in 18 months. The republic is lost. And that's why we have to fight differently.
All right. So you got another job, U.S. pardon attorney. Trump loves a good pardon. What's the focus there?
Well, this is awesome, by the way, Alex. I know you're a man of faith yourself, and I mean,
Sure.
it's awesome. Over the weekend, the president, pardoned a sheriff down in Central Virginia who'd been conservative on immigration, conservative on Second Amendment, a good old boy. And he'd been rung up by the Biden administration using this honest services charge, and they were going to put him in jail for 10 years. He probably doesn't survive for 10 minutes in a jail, in a federal jail if you're a sheriff. So President Trump pardoned him. But that's a little flashy, if I can say. What he's really doing for President Trump is we have this incredible woman, Alice Johnson, who herself was pardoned, and she's the pardon czar. And she and I are working together to try to find people that are worthy of, frankly, that mercy. And the president's really interested in making that happen. And I do think that the really fun thing for me, Alex, is also that, the pardon, when people are pardoned, they have immunity from prosecution. And so you can bring in, for example, Fauci may be pardoned. His chief of staff may be worried about his own future. Well, you can either pardon him or give him immunity, and you can bring him in and say, tell us the truth about what went on. In other words, pardon is a valuable thing for the person getting it. It's also a tool in this battle. And I think the president is committed to kind of helping serve people, and it's really fun. I mean, I got to tell you, I've been looking at some pardons, commutations. People serve 20 years in jail for minor possession of drugs, and they've model citizens now in jail, and they want to get out and have a life. I mean, you don't have to go too far in your Bible to see that this is powerful stuff. And Alice Johnson is an extremely kind person to lead us on this, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, you got to come back and keep me posted on some of those, because that was one where most government jobs, even cool ones for Trump, don't seem that great. That one seems pretty cool to go through all the parts. That seems like a good one. I got to ask about Derek Chauvin. There was all these rumors that Trump is thinking of pardoning Derek Chauvin, who was kneeling on George Floyd's neck when he died. We learned later Floyd apparently died of a fentanyl overdose and not from the kneeling. Though that said, Eddie, you don't have to read very much about Chauvin to know he's not a saintly guy. But second-degree murder, third-degree murder, 20 years in jail plus. It's a lot. It's a lot for what that is. I mean, is that on the horizon? Anything to report there?
Well, I'll say it this way. The first day I was on the job, Donald Trump pardoned all of the J6 folks, right? It came into my office as U.S. attorney. It was a totally amazing thing. I dealt with for about 2 weeks some of the sort of residual pardons, and it was extraordinary. 2 days after that, he pardoned 2 cops that were charged with murder in the Metropolitan Police Department. It was unfair, and he pardoned them. The day after that, he pardoned all the pro-lifers. He has a vision for taking on the challenging ones that people will criticize.
Yep.
When it comes to Derek Chauvin, I am Ed Martin as pardon attorney looking at it. I'm looking at it very closely. I agree with you on your assessment. I think that's very clear that it was a drug overdose. And it's very clear that Derek Chauvin is not a saint, but neither am I. I know you're not. And so here we are. The question is whether there's a role to be played for commutation or pardon. And more importantly, whether the system of justice has to be checked every now and then for fairness. Yes. It's not only mercy on someone. It's I watched that trial, and that was not a fair trial. I also watched lots of January 6th trials where people were trapped in a system that was not being administered the way America at our best should administer justice. So you want to be careful not to reject the system, but you want to be clear in criticizing it. And I think Derek Chauvin's case very clearly was problematic in how it went about, and therefore it's worth, again, a look that's different than a different time or different place. It deserves a hard look, and I know I'm taking a look at it. I can't speak for the president at this point, but I think at some point he will be. He's a serious guy. He'll take a look at it too.
The J6 thing is a perfect example because it was not great stuff happened that day. Most stuff that happened that day was not great, including the violence. But I feel like Trump almost declared a unilateral mistrial on all of it, because it was all the mischaracterization of justice. That's kind of how I formulated it in my head. And I think that's why he pardoned even the violent people there, was because of that. It was like, because clearly this was not fair. So you got to throw it all out. And I would love to interview him on, I should have, I had a chance and I didn't get around to asking him about that, but I bet you that's what he was thinking. Did you ever talk to him about that?
No, you know what's funny about it is you're going to smile, Alex. I actually, when he won the election in November, I wanted to be U.S. attorney in D.C. and I was told someone else wants the job. The second job I asked for was pardon attorney because I assumed he wouldn't pardon everyone. I assumed the political judgment would be pardon all the easy ones. The hard ones are going to be later. And I wanted to be an advocate for how to handle it. So I was never consulted beforehand. I've never talked to him about it specifically, but I have a vision like you have where he just thought that whole system was off balance. Yep. And having dealt with the judges in the district court here as U.S. attorney, many of them are just off balance. They just don't have they're not connected to the reality. Again, you said it well. Bad day and some bad people or some people did some bad things should be held accountable. After that, you couldn't get a fair trial in D.C. and the judges were berating people and treating them terribly and pretending that these were people that should be held in terrible conditions because they're like domestic terrorists. It was off balance.
Ed, I'm so happy you're in the roles you're in. You're doing an amazing job, and you have been for decades. Ed Martin, who holds 3 important titles now, Associate Deputy Attorney General, Weaponization Czar, U.S. Pardon Attorney. Thanks for making all the time today. Come back anytime. Thanks to your right hand, Neil McCabe, who used to work for me, did great work for me at Breitbart, who's helping you out. He's doing a nice job as well. Anything I can plug for you? You're at Eagle Ed Martin on X. I know it's your personal account. Any place I can direct people?
No, I think that's good for now. And I'll come back again. We'll talk about more stuff that's going on.
So great that you're up to such great stuff, Ed. It makes me proud, and I know we're all rooting for you in Breitbart land.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.